Hello, welcome. Today's episode is going to hit a little bit differently. We've got a fairly clickbaity title for today's topic, which is a vital one that needs to be spoken about, which is menopause in the legal workspace, the shocking truth. So, yeah, apologies for the clickbaity title, but it's good to grab some attention, I think, sometimes. So, today I'm joined by Hannah Strawbridge. We've got a big intro coming up, so just sit yourself in and get ready for this one. Experienced employment solicitor, tribunal advocate, and CEO and sole founder of Han Law. Not only that, but Hannah is also Entrepreneurial Businesswoman of the Year 2024. And she's also a keynote speaker and a Legal 500 recommended employment law solicitor. So she is a fairly big deal. At Han Law, they've developed a menopause advocacy services for businesses of all sizes, which includes training that's going to cover all aspects of menopause. And alongside this, there's a planned rollout of menopause mentor scheme to support individuals navigating menopause. So I think I've bigged her up enough by now, giving her a little bit of an intro. So let's hear from Hannah. Welcome.
Hi, Becky. Thanks so much for having me. That was quite a big intro. Makes me sound far more important than I'm sure I am.
You've
But
done a
yeah,
lot of
thanks for
things.
having me.
Pleasure.
Showing my age. But yeah, I'm Hannah. I'm an employment solicitor. I've been in employment law for my whole career. 4 years ago, I set up Han Law to try to offer something different within the legal industry. And I wanted to set up a business that was more diverse and just a bit more modern to enable people from all backgrounds to be able to sort of juggle their lives with their legal careers, which I was finding to be quite lacking. So I was struggling, with two young boys, but still feeling ambitious about wanting to continue my career in the law. And what I found was some of the traditional firms were very much kind of 9 to 5 and lacked flexibility and just didn't offer that kind of more modern approach to work. So when I set up Han Law, it was kind of to offer something differently, and that's what we're doing 4 years on. So we've got a team of 12 consultants. Everyone receives a fee share of the work that they actually do rather than a flat salary. They also work completely remotely and flexibly, which is quite unusual, again, in the law. And it means we've got such a wide variety of people with, doing lots of different things, caring for people, having families, and being able to choose how, when, and where they work. So it's quite exciting, and we're really happy with being shortlisted for quite a few awards. And I think that's great on its own, but I think it's more impactful that we can say, we can show that, we can still grow a business, we can still attract clients, but we can do it with working within this more modern kind of culture where the team are happier and, get to have more time off and get to work around the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations. So not only are you doing right by you and your employees, but also you're being recognized for that within the wider space, which is fantastic. So yeah, good for you. Thank you, Laura, who has given us a little wave this morning. Laura Jimenez has jumped in, one of my previous podcast guests, which is lovely. So hello. Please let us know you're here by giving us a wave, and also go ahead and drop your questions in at the box as well, because we would love to hear from you. Just makes us feel like we're not just on our own here, which is always nice, isn't it? So let's go back to the beginning then, Hannah. What prompted you to become an advocate for menopause in the first place? What started it all off?
So it's kind of been a natural, organic progression, really. I wouldn't say I was ever a massive banging on the drum feminist, but I think over the years of working within, to be frank, what it still is or used to be quite a male-dominated industry, at least sort of at senior level. Certainly, I was finding it, like I've just said, hard to juggle family life with work. And realistically, although there are lots of men doing that juggle as well, we're still finding that primarily it tends to be more the woman that sort of will be the one to kind of do reduced hours. Obviously, it's changing, but it is still kind of like that. Within the law, it was very much kind of that environment. And I think having set up my own business, which has been primarily women, not because I've wanted it to be like that, but just because the sort of people that want to come and work with us are those that want a more flexible structure to date. It's just kind of naturally gone from there. Hannah Law was set up just before COVID, so it's been kind of like a tough time to start a new business with no clients,
Absolutely.
no investment, which is what I did. And I think as COVID sort of rolled through, I was reading and doing a lot of research around women's rights in the workplace generally, and it was coming out that the way COVID was managed, in particular, the government at the time meant that, you know, women's rights in the workplace have been denigrated by about 50 years as a result of COVID. So we'd gone right back, and it was hard to know exactly why that was. And it's, you know, something that research agencies were doing a lot of work on. Some of it was due to the homeschooling, you know, women, and we were seeing that as clients to Hannah Law, you know, women saying that they were having their hours cut, or they wanted to have their hours cut, or they wanted to quit their jobs because they couldn't manage, you know, someone had to homeschool the kids, and it generally fell more on them than their partners. So there was that denigration then anyway, and I've kind of become passionate about talking about women's rights at work. And the reason for that isn't just for women and for individuals, you know, and it isn't just because we deal with, you know, claims by women for things like discrimination and bullying at work, as we do for, you know, people that have been racially discriminated against as well, or on account of their sexual orientation. It wasn't just around that, but it's around the fact that, you know, without diversity in leadership teams, that business, that organisation won't be as profitable, and it won't run as smoothly, it won't be as efficient, and it won't be as strong a business as those that are diverse. And that's because we, you know, there's so much research on that is proven. And as a result, you know, it affects the UK economy as a whole if we're not having that diversity. So, you know, we've got the sort of the group of women who might have been homeschooling with young kids, and you know, that's been an area I think people naturally think of when they think about, you know, equality and women's rights at work. You know, the women that are on maternity leave that might come back and, you know, are struggling because they might have been demoted as a result, or, you know, or homeschooling. But then what kind of came out was, you know, there is this massive group of women who are a bit older, you know, where they're also having challenges at the next stage of their life, which is going through the perimenopause and the menopause. And it's not something I knew a lot about, if I'm honest. But I knew sort of around, I'm 44, and around 41, I started, you know, having certain symptoms that I wasn't sure was related to hormones. And I think because it's been more of a hot topic, that's something that I kind of explored for myself personally. And then when I looked into, you know, some of the research around it, and I followed certain people on Instagram, you know, it became clear that, yeah, we've always all got on with it in work, but the stats around women working with the menopause were really sobering. So, you know, 1 in 10 women quitting their jobs as a result of the menopause. You know, and if you look at those sort of statistics, we're losing a massive chunk of society within the workplace if those stats are right, which, you know, they are. And as a result of that, you're getting less diversity. Again, you know, and that's going to have a knock-on effect, not only on that individual, but on the business that they work with and on the economy as a whole. So I think I've got the stat written down here actually, but the UK economy loses something like £1.8 billion a year due to sick days as a result of menopause and perimenopause.
Right.
So I'd say to anyone, if anyone thinks this isn't a problem for them, you know, anyone that's running a business, managing a business, it really is, and it's probably one of the biggest kind of issues that I think needs to be addressed. So, you know, we naturally sort of started digging into all of this. And part of the reason is because as employment lawyers, like I say, we deal with work issues, obviously, but we also deal with discrimination claims brought by individuals, and whether that's, you know, women on account of sex discrimination, race, disability discrimination, all these different things. You know, we were seeing some more grievances come to light more from women of perimenopausal age, feeling like they weren't being supported enough in the workplace, or people were laughing at their symptoms, you know, and things like that. And, you know, them not being able to cope with their work as they used to be able to do, and just feeling like they didn't know how to carry on. which is such a shame. I mean, aside from the fact that, no longer can anyone say by 50, that's the end of your career. We're all living longer. And really, women at that age, in a way, have got more to give than at any other age, because most women, if they had children, they might be getting older now. So they want to start putting more back into their career. It's almost the opposite. And yet it feels like it's that group that are kind of, still this sort of vibe of, oh, you're that old now, it doesn't really matter. And, like I say, we're all living older, and that's kind of like a key area of work. And also those people are bringing all their life experience into that role as well at that age. There's so much going on there. And sort of how all this came about in terms of our survey was, I reached out to Dr. Louise Newson, who anyone who knows anything about menopause, she's the menopause doctor. She's on This Morning a lot, and she's got a massive voice, and she's helped a lot of women in this area. She focuses more on the medical side of it, and pushing for women to be heard in private consultations about HRT, because that's a whole other area. And she and her business agreed to support us with the data survey that we put together. So what we did is, and this is something I'd never done before, so it was all kind of all new to me and all learning points, but we put together a survey for women working and around how their symptoms affected their work, and how well or not well their employer dealt with those symptoms. And within a week, we got 3,000 responses. Now, I don't know anything about data gathering, but I've been told that's really good, especially for a business that doesn't do this as their day job. But to me, that just shows how women wanted to be heard, and how much of an issue this was. And then really it's gone on from there, and I'm sure you'll pick out some of the stats and kind of what we're looking at as solutions. But yeah, without waffling on forever, that's kind of the backstory to it.
No, that's really interesting, though, because at the end of the day, we're talking about 50% of the workforce. And as you've highlighted, these women in their 40s and 50s, the wealth of experience behind them, they've got no necessarily childcare obligations anymore. If their kids are at uni or, left home, fully prepared to invest more into their careers, but they're not able to do so, which is an absolute tragedy. I've just realised you and I are the same age, Hannah. So there we go. I'm 44 as well. So interesting. But yeah, definitely an interesting topic for me, and it's something that really needs to be highlighted. I mean, the results, as I had in the title, which is the shocking truth, which may well shock a lot of our listeners and viewers. I mean, we're saying that these stats that came from the 3,000 people that you surveyed, 98% of respondents suffered from menopausal symptoms. So that's 98 people out of 3,000, 98% of people, out of 3,000, with 90% saying that the symptoms affected their work. Now that's huge, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think with this survey, it's good to kind of say that these people weren't incentivized in any way. It was just shared across our socials and across these Newson's socials. Obviously, she's got a lot of followers, and pretty much everyone following her has some interest personally or in another way with menopause. But she'd never done anything specifically work related. So yeah, these are women that wanted to be heard, and some of the survey was quantitative data stuff with the stats, which we can go into a bit of, but then also we did have a qualitative side as well. So we've got quotes from a lot of different women about how difficult things have been for them, and women that have not really spoken to anyone about it as well. So yeah, I mean, the statistics were shocking, and I think generally there was. It also showed that even those women on HRT, they still had struggles at work. So I think sometimes there's an opinion that, well, if everyone got HRT that needed it, then it wouldn't need to be an employer's problem. We disagree with that, because employers have a duty of care by law and morally anyway to look after their employees. And I just think it's a bit of a cop out, really, to just say, get the drugs and then it's okay. And we all know anyway, HRT doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone can take it, and it might take the edge off, but it doesn't often take away the symptoms. What we found is, as much as there are big organisations doing things like focusing on cold drinks, having fans, and anything relating to some of the physical symptoms, things like hot flushes, to be honest, the overwhelming amount of comments and statistics and personal statements that people made in our survey was all around the neurological effects. And that's kind of scary because that means it relates to things like fatigue, memory loss, brain fog, lack of concentration. All those things are obviously going to affect how your ability to do a job, aren't they? Whatever your job is.
Of course, and lack of confidence. So if you're presenting or, you know, doing things that you would normally be doing, and all of a sudden you're standing up in front of people and you've got that feeling that all of a sudden you can't do it, like that must be terrifying.
Exactly. So, you know, I think from this we were thinking, you know, I don't know, maybe the emphasis is too much sometimes on some of the physical symptoms, when I think, I know in my experience, you know, the hot flushes are awful, it can be annoying, but you can kind of deal with them. Whereas, you know, it's like you say, the lack of confidence and memory and things like that, where you start to feel like you're going mad because you suddenly forgot something that you know was in your brain, you know, and that's hard. And I think it's that kind of understanding really that it felt like the people in our survey were saying they didn't have, and they weren't able to speak to their employer about.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's another statistic that's popped up, which is 60% of your respondents wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to their employer about their symptoms or their situation, with 70% saying they didn't think the employer would take menopause seriously, which is just so sad.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that comes back to, you know, how important it is to have diversity within businesses and within management teams and boards and leadership teams, because a lot of the comments again were things like women saying, you know, no matter how sympathetic their boss might be, there were quite a few women saying, you know, in the day he's a man, so you know, I feel awkward and embarrassed speaking to him, and I don't think he'll understand it, even if he maybe did understand it. So, you know, obviously, it's easier for people to speak to someone if they know they understand or they've been through it themselves. As well. So there was definitely that comment that, you know, I don't want to speak to that person because my boss is a man, I just don't want to, or someone that's younger as well. So that kind of, to us, that flagged up how important it is to have people within workplaces that potentially have been through it themselves or are going through it, because you know that always kind of works better to allow the other person to have a safe space, you know, to talk about those things if they feel like someone else gets it. You know, and the fact is, if they're not feeling able to have that basic conversation, then, you know, I think I'd be worried about that as an employer. You know, I'd be worried about that person, and I'd be worried about the quality of the work that's being put out at times. You know, if you've got women that are struggling with, you know, various symptoms and they're trying to battle it on through work, you know, it would concern me really that they didn't feel they could speak to anyone.
Yes, because I guess the more you struggle on your own without getting any support, probably the more panicky I can imagine you're going to feel, and then you're going to start doubting yourself, which is like just a self-perpetuating cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. And like some of the tribunal cases we've seen, you know, they do involve things like mistakes being made or women being performance managed, and some of that was coming out as sort of being as partly down to the symptoms that they were dealing with. But, you know, in the first place, they were struggling to actually speak to anyone about it. And we'd say, you know, all of this can be avoided with the right kind of in-house support. And just writing a menopause policy isn't going to encourage women to, you know, speak to their employers about what they're going through, and to ask for any adjustments, and to just say, you know, this is how I feel, or, you know, or just things like someone, you know, not having slept all night and then being expected to work in an office 9 to 5 every day. In our experience, that just doesn't often work. And certainly within my own team, I've got a couple of the ladies who left Big Law because of that, because they'd raised it. But at the end of the day, if they're not going to be a flexible employer and allow them to work potentially within the comfort of their own home, you know, when they've not slept and when they feel fatigued, you know, and they don't trust them to do that, then that's going to be an issue, and that they're leaving kind of that environment and, you know, working somewhere more flexible like us, where frankly, if they're having a day where they do feel very fatigued and exhausted, they'll do what they need to do as a minimum, to make sure the clients are okay. But, they're not going to sit there and slog away, because there's no point, because they're not going to be working to the full potential.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there's so much here to go on. To be honest, we could be here all day.
I know, it's a fascinating topic. So can you tell us a bit more about the Menopause Mentor Scheme? I mean, that's where you say you've got that person there in the workplace that's the safe space that people can go and talk to if they are struggling.
Yeah, so what we're excited about, which is going to be announced soon, but we're entering into a partnership with an amazing menopause organisation to be able to roll out some of the solutions that we sort of feel are needed as a result of our data. And, we'll be doing some of the things some of the other businesses do, all sorts of training and workshops around menopause that we want to roll out to employers across the country. And what we've done is come up with different packages as well, whether you're a corporate, an SME business, or a new startup, because we're aware that different businesses need different things depending on your level of growth and your budget. But we've sort of packaged that up so that you can get some employment law support and some HR support, and then also some of the menopause specific training that we offer. So we're offering the training, but then what we felt was really vital, which a lot of businesses aren't doing, is, like you say, the menopause champions, which is accredited qualification. And it's brilliant because it means there's someone basically in that business who's sort of acting as a conduit between the employee and the employer, to sort of resolve any issues there might be, any struggles that employees having, and someone that they can go to and speak about, and it can be confidential if they want it to be, or it might not be, but it acts as that sort of middle ground, and someone that person knows they can speak to, they can build up a relationship with, and sort of resolve any issues, really, rather than, grievances like we're seeing, or tribunal claims because someone's had to go off sick because they're not supported. It's kind of dealing with it in the first place, and it's common sense, really, if you think about it. But we certainly think that with some of these people, they're not just going to go and speak to their manager, no matter how, it's something that women still don't like speaking about. And so, if the right people are in these roles that they know that they they understand it, then that is going to make a big difference.
Massively. So how does that work in practice then? Like, what kind of size businesses are we talking about where this would be rolled out at?
Well, again, I mean, we're trying, although we're packaging up sort of various options, we also, because we're still a boutique firm, we want to make sure that it's all very bespoke to that organisation and what their needs are. And one of the things we can do to kind of assess where a business is up to with menopause is to go in and actually roll out the survey that we've already done to their employees, if the employer is brave enough, to sort of assess where they're up to, and speak to the people in that organisation and get some feedback as to what's good, what's not so good, what they need, what's working, what's not working. And then from there, we can come up with a solution to look at sort of filling those gaps. Because we want it to be a very much collaborative approach. It's not a slap on the wrist. This is all good stuff. What we want to be able to do is then go away and potentially, we really want them to see that impact, see what's improved, see that retention rate is improved, rather than just a nice to have a box ticking exercise, actually see that impact has been made into that business.
Yeah, I see. So what kind of approaches have you used? If you could just give us maybe a couple of examples on what you've done to work with businesses as part of their plan.
Yeah, so to be honest, this is all very new, Becky. So yeah, I mean, generally within Hannah Law, our main focus is sort of the employment law support, which includes tribunal claims, employment law advice. We've got mediators on the HR side, covering all that up. And this is quite a new solution. So we're we've already had quite a lot of interest from various clients that we already work with and other contacts. But I guess this is all new. So yeah, we'll have to see how it's all going to go.
Yeah, and like you say, it can be bespoke to each business as well. So by doing that survey, then you're going to have the data to know what these people need and what they're struggling with, because that's the thing with it as well. It's so different to every individual as well, right? You know, I've spoken to a lot of women that are my age and a bit older, and they all have, you know, wildly varying symptoms. So it's definitely not a one size fits all approach, is it?
No, and to be honest, that's one of the things that's really difficult for employers as well, and for that individual, because I think sometimes they're honestly not sure whether that's a menopause hormonal symptom or something else. You know,
Yeah.
because we all lead kind of hectic, stressful lives, and sometimes, you know, there's stuff going on that, you know, you sort of think, is that hormones, or is it just the sort of lives we lead, and you know how busy we all are, and that we're in a 24/7 culture, aren't we? So yeah, I think that makes it interesting and quite tricky. But I think, you know, I just say to employers, really, it is common sense in a way. It's about sort of being interested, listening to your staff, you know, having those one-to-one meetings with people, not assuming that it's one size fits all, not assuming that everyone needs a fan because they've got a
Yeah.
hot flush, you know, and just kind of being aware of that and always being there and open to conversation about it.
Absolutely. And I've had a couple of instances just among my own family with my two children. I have two daughters, and you know, sometimes I'll forget something I'm going to say, or I can't remember the word for it or what have you, and they'll be like, "Oh, menopause, mum," and I'll be like, you know, I started laughing about it at first, and I was like, actually, this is not funny. You know, it sounds like funny when it's happening to somebody else, but when it's happening to an intelligent woman who's worked all her life and, you know, knows her shit, all of a sudden you're forgetting words or forgetting what you were going to say. I said, well, you just wait until you get to this age, because it's not a laughing matter. It really isn't. And if women are experiencing that in the workplace, that's even worse, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I do think there's still, even though people are talking about it, there is still a culture around women feeling like what even we thinking what we're moaning about. Like I know my mum would just say, well, we never had that, we just got on with it.
Yeah.
You know, and we are getting on with it, but you know, if there can be support to help women not quit the workplace too early, then why wouldn't we be exploring it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do think there's still that cultural shift that needs to be made, and even though we've had so much positive sort of feedback around sort of what we've been talking about, we still find there's very few men kind of engage in it or sort of like
Yeah.
those posts. And I can understand why that is. You know, if they're not going through it personally, then it's quite hard to relate to. But I do think there needs to be more, you know, open conversation. You know, we're not moaning about it; we're just telling it how it is, and
Yeah.
you know,
That's
and
it.
just trying to make things a bit better for people.
And chances are these men have got wives or partners that are going through it. So by just pretending it's not happening is not going to help anybody. Being more empathetic to your partner is certainly going to help your own relationship, as well as potentially helping other women in the workplace as well. So it's something that we all need to be talking about for sure.
Definitely.
Cool. So have you had any were you surprised by the results of your survey? Was there anything that particularly stood out for you, or did you think that's kind of how things were?
I honestly thought it would be a bit. I think anyone working in this area has sort of said they're not surprised, but kind of coming into this new, um, I thought it would be a bit more positive, because obviously the chat out there with a lot of corporates in particular is that they're doing everything they need to do, you know, and we've approached some businesses to sort of explore what we do, and you know, some of the larger businesses will say, oh, we're really well set up for all that. We've got employment, you know, engagement systems around this. This is a slightly different thing, though. So, you know, sometimes it's outsourced to a third party, you know, where it's like an app
Right.
or something like that where they can chat through. But in our experience, women don't often use that the same as they would if it was much more kind of in the organization and embedded into it. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think you listen to a lot of people saying, yeah, we've got a menopause policy. Okay, you've got a policy, but if I'm honest, that doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything or have any impact unless that is brought into the organisation by training and, you know, actually brought to life, a bit like any HR policy. So I think when you hear this stuff, people think, oh, everyone's doing a lot, but are the right things being done, and are they actually showing an impact? Because what we're keen on doing is really being measurable with that, which isn't going to be
Yeah.
easy, but you know, you've got to be able to show that because of what you've done, this is what's improved, rather than
Yeah.
just a tick box exercise. So I thought wrongly thought it would be more positive. And I think that's obviously what spurred us on to say, even though it feels like out there in the PR world, a lot's being done. Clearly, individuals now working, you know, this was only done a few months ago, doing this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking about going back to your point about perhaps our mother's generation, you know, we got on with it, and I've definitely heard those comments before. And although my mother doesn't have that, she definitely struggled with it for sure. But then, like, maybe 40 odd years ago, 50 years ago, there were less women running their own businesses, you know, or being in leadership roles. So it's just, I don't think that's a fair comment to make, because it's a completely different world now where we are expected, and we want to do it all as well. You know, we've got more ambition. So it's being able to get up every day and go to work and manage everything, including managing our children and perhaps elderly relatives, as well as work, that's made sure that we need to feel as best as we can do.
Totally, yeah, exactly. Couldn't have said it better than myself.
Oh, thank you. Very good. So we could chat about this all day, I think, but we probably shouldn't, because people will want to be cracking on with their days. So we'll just quickly highlight a webinar that you're involved with, Hannah, that's coming up, which is Menopause and Employment Law, a guide for HR. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Because that is coming up. I'm just having a quick look at my notes. It's on
I can't
Monday,
remember the date myself now.
15th of July. 15th of
That's
July from 12:30 till 1:30. So yeah, what can attendees expect from that one?
Yeah, so it's a completely free webinar to anyone working within, you know, any HR leaders or anyone working in the DEI space that just wants to find out more and, you know, have a safe space to discuss around the sort of things their organisation is doing, and to explore more around, you know, why we're here, what we're doing, how that could help their organisation. So it's going to be a bit of a taster, and we're doing that alongside Hayley White of Menospace, kind of who's the expert in this stuff on the ground, just to really give them that taster and get some free advice, to be honest, around sort of the employment law side of it and things like that. And then hopefully, you know, if they're interested, then that's kind of where we can link in with them and sort of talk a little bit more about what we do.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that sounds really good. What we'll do is we'll put the link in the show notes. This episode will be live on the podcast next week, so everything will go on there, including your website, Hannah, and your LinkedIn. So if people do want to get in touch about this specific topic, or maybe about anything else, is the best place to find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think so. I do a lot on LinkedIn, as people know. It's kind of it works really well for us. We get a great network through there, and it's a good place for us to talk about the sort of work we're doing around menopause at work as well.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, lovely. And if there are any other resources that we can think of to add on, then we indeed will. So next week we have a completely different topic. Still in the legal industry, we're talking to Reese Hodgkinson from Definely, and we're going to be chatting about whether your law firm needs AI. So that will be something a little bit different again. So we do like to cover a diverse range of topics here at Legal Content Chat. But thank you so much for coming, Hannah. It's been a really lovely conversation. It's been eye-opening for sure for me. I was definitely shocked by those, and saddened actually by the results of the survey that you ran. And I just really hope that you're going to make some good strides moving forward.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great. Becky.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you next week. Cheerio for now.